It's already week 9 of the fantasy football season. If you're looking for a quarterback, a wide receiver, or a tight end, we got plenty of names available. If you're looking for a running back, it's a little thin. That's right, today we're going to be diving into the waiver wire, but before we do, we have a few sections we need to cover first. How about some of the bigger injuries from just last week? 5 things that we learned from week 8, what teams are on upcoming bye, and then we can actually dive into the waiver wire and see what names could potentially help your fantasy football team. But let's go ahead and start off with the injuries that we saw in week 8, and once again, there's injuries everywhere. The first one has to be quarterback Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. He suffered a groin injury. There's a chance that he could play this week. X-rays did come back negative, but honestly, it's going to be one of those things that we're probably going to have to wait till late in the week to even find out. With the way that injuries have been reported here as of late in the NFL, it's really hard to trust. It's great news that it's not a major injury, but would I be surprised if he missed this week? Absolutely not. But he is definitely somebody we need to pay close attention to here remainder of the week. Also lost Drake May due to concussion. He's currently in concussion protocol. Do we see him out in week 9? How about Jordan Mason, running back of the San Francisco 49ers? He re-injured his AC joint injury, but now they're going on bye. So what really happens after the bye week? CMC is supposed to return. Does that actually happen is the question. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of teams out there that haven't exactly been truthful when it comes to injury reports here as of late in 2024. After Jordan Mason, what about Stephon Diggs? He suffered a potential season-ending knee injury. We know that Nico Collins is coming back week 10. Hopefully, but it sounds like we may be without Stephon Diggs for quite some time. Christian Kirk, he suffered a collarbone injury. He is done for the year. Another Jacksonville Jaguar got hurt as well. This one, a little bit more big time. How about Brian Thomas Jr.? He suffered a rib/chest injury that's going to keep him out 2 to 4 weeks. Something to keep in mind here, the Jacksonville Jaguars have a week 12 bye. Is it possible that we don't see Brian Thomas Jr. until after their bye week in week 13? That could really suck for a lot of fantasy football owners. And then Deebo Samuel, he suffered a rib injury there Sunday Night Football, but all signs are pointing to him being okay. What's a little bit more precautionary, they are on bye this week as well, so he'll have time to heal up. Now, I also know that DJ Moore and Josh Jacobs kind of got banged up as well, but I'm not seeing any information about serious injuries that could cause them to miss some time. So let's go ahead and move into the 5 things we learned in week 8 now. And the first one has to be National Tight End Day actually freaking matters. 16 touchdowns scored by tight ends in week 8, and a whopping 15 tight ends in fantasy football scored over 10 fantasy points just this past weekend. Tight ends actually had 177 receptions on Sunday. That is a single-day NFL record. It may be a made-up holiday, but teams pay attention to it and feed their tight ends on National Tight End Day, which is great because we've had horrible production from that position majority of the season. Next thing up, Baker Mayfield is still an MVP candidate. This dude loses his number 1 wide receiver. He loses his number 2 wide receiver and still goes out and throws for 330 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, the team's win-loss record is probably really going to be the ultimate deciding factor to remove Baker from the MVP race, but he is playing great football and he needs to be recognized for what he's doing on the field. Over the years, people were so eager to just jump on Baker Mayfield and bash the dude. Now that he's actually out there balling out of control, dude needs some respect. And speaking of respect, how about this one? Is Bo Nix better than Caleb Williams? Listen to this. Bo Nix currently has 1,530 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions to go along with 259 yards rushing and 4 rushing touchdowns, all while throwing the football to Cortland Sutton, Lil Jordan Humphrey, and Devon Vele. When on the other hand, we have Caleb Williams, who has 1,448 yards passing, 9 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 210 yards rushing, and no rushing touchdowns when he's throwing to the likes of DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, and Cole Kmet. So despite having all those weapons, Bo Nix has thrown for more yards, has 1 less passing touchdown, but has 4 more rushing touchdowns on the ground, and has less interceptions. I'm sorry, but given the surrounding cast and what's actually around Bo Nix compared to Caleb Williams, this talk needs to be had because Bo Nix is playing great football where Caleb Williams at times just looks completely lost. But we also learned that the Rams are poised for another late season run. We saw this exact same thing last year. The team got healthy, made a late second half run. From week 12 on last season, Matthew Stafford averaged 20.8 fantasy points per game and was the quarterback 6 overall. Now, just last week in week 8, Matthew Stafford finished as the quarterback 5 overall and just had his first game with 2+ passing touchdowns on the year. We know that Puka looks 100% healthy. Doesn't look like Cooper Kupp is going anywhere. People can't really guard Demarcus Robinson, and Kyren Williams is out there scoring touchdowns every single game. Now, are the Rams going to win the Super Bowl? No. Probably not, but this offense is set to explode second half of the season. And then lastly, I believe that CeeDee Lamb saved some coaching jobs in week 8. This Dallas offense is absolute hot garbage overall. What are they doing running the football with the worst running offense in the NFL by far in the fourth quarter when they're down by 2+ scores? I mean, if it wasn't for the San Francisco defense just pulling back a little bit there late in the game, Dallas would have absolutely been embarrassed in back-to-back games. Because for the first 3.5 quarters of the game, they couldn't run the ball successfully. Dak was just flinging prayers up down the field that were being intercepted, and then he was also throwing to guys who were standing out of bounds. The offensive line couldn't stop anyone, and it was apparent that Dak was just panicked. And then the last few minutes of the game, in garbage time, we get some deep touchdowns to CeeDee Lamb, which is great for fantasy purposes. Trust me, I understand that. But it also made the box score look like the game was a lot closer than it really was. Now, you have to think that if this offense doesn't improve over the next couple weeks, something has to change. I mean, doesn't it? But all right, enough of that. Now let's move on to some upcoming bye weeks. Only 2 teams on bye in week 9. The first one is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Russell Wilson, Najee Harris, maybe Jalen Warren if you're using him, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, they will not be available alongside the San Francisco 49ers, which we've already talked about. Brock Purdy, Jordan Mason, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, they will not be available for your fantasy football team this week either. So let's transition into the waiver wire now for week 9, and let's start it off at the quarterback position. And maybe you found yourself starting a Russell Wilson or a Brock Purdy. You need to stream somebody here this week. Maybe you lost Jordan Love. Some good options on the waiver wire for a lot of people. The first one is Bo Nix. We've kind of already talked about him one time in this show, but he's only 25% owned and has a matchup this week going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Over the last 3 weeks of the season, Bo Nix is the quarterback 3 overall in fantasy football, and he's averaging 22.2 fantasy points per game. The only other quarterbacks in fantasy right now to have more points than him over that span are Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield. And now this week he gets a matchup going up against Baltimore, who allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks, and they have allowed over 300 yards passing in 4 of their last 6 games played. And on top, we have a little bit of a rushing upside there with Bo Nix, and we know that Baltimore is easier to throw on than run on. A good option here this week on the waiver wire. Also, Matthew Stafford, another name we've already talked about. He's currently 39% owned, and he's going up against Seattle. And we've really seen this story before, right? We mentioned this when we were talking about the things that we've learned. When LA gets healthy on offense, they go off. And now that we know that Puka is 100% healthy and Kupp is back and Kyren scoring touchdowns, who out there is really going to guard Demarcus Robinson at that point? And we know Seattle is vulnerable through the air. Matthew Stafford, another great option this week. How about Jameis Winston of the Cleveland Browns? He's only 6% owned in a matchup going up against the Los Angeles Chargers. And Jameis just came out in his first start and just ate that W, right? He had 334 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions, finishes the quarterback 10 overall. We know this running game in Cleveland still not really producing, and Jameis has always wanted to fling the ball down the field. Let's not forget, this guy has thrown for over 5,000 yards in a season at some time in his career. Now, sure, that was many moons ago, but on a team that's struggling to move the ball on the ground right now, we've already seen Jameis go out there and want to throw the ball consistently down the field. So if you're looking for fantasy points, that's a good place to find it. So really 3 great options if you're looking for somebody at the quarterback position. All right, now on to running backs. And I mentioned in the opening, there's not a whole lot out there on the waiver wire. But we'll go through a couple names here, and then I want to talk about something else that's really important here second half of the season. First name up, Keaton Mitchell of Baltimore Ravens. He's only owned in 11% of leagues. Their opponent this week is the Denver Broncos, but I know he's nearing return. Is it somebody that we can pick up and count on using this week? No. Probably not. What I would really like to do is add Keaton Mitchell throw him into your IR spot if possible, and then pick up another player off the waiver wire. Now, Keaton Mitchell may not turn into anything here this season coming off the knee injury, but if you can snag him a little bit early, I think he's worth the flyer if you have the availability. Then we got Roschon Johnson of the Chicago Bears. He's only owned in 22% of leagues. They're going up against Arizona. And all this guy really does is score touchdowns because he doesn't get very many touches in this offense. But he does have 4 touchdowns over his last 4 games, and Arizona just allowed 3 touchdowns to the running backs in Miami last week. But we also have to look at the production of DeAndre Swift here as of late. If he were to go down, Roschon Johnson in line for increased volume. And then Isaac Guerendo of the San Francisco 49ers, currently 15% owned, but they are on a bye this week. And this one right here is 100% one of those what-if scenarios. He looked good in Week 8 against Dallas. He looked fast when he had the ball in his hands, but we also know that Jordan Mason re-injured his shoulder injury, but with the team going on bye and expecting Christian McCaffrey back in Week 10, is Isaac Guerendo even going to be a thing? Well, with Jordan Mason injured, what happens if Christian McCaffrey does not return in Week 10? Or what happens if he returns to a limited role and Jordan Mason is still injured? We could be looking at more touches going the way of Isaac Guerendo over the next couple of weeks regardless. If they only have a running back with a shoulder injury and then another running back with dual Achilles tendonitis, this offense, who loves to have some speed on the field, may still use Isaac Guerendo down the stretch. Not somebody you can immediately count on, but somebody who's worth the stash. But all right, like I said, I wanted to add something different to the running back section here in Week 9. I know we're now heading into the second half of the fantasy football season, and this is something that I feel is very important at this time of the year. We really need to discuss who are the top handcuffs that need to be owned right now in fantasy football. We're heading into the winter months. Teams are going to start running the ball a little bit more. That means we have a higher likelihood of injuries here second half of the season. If you can stash just one of these handcuffs and an injury happens, you may be looking at a league-winning running back pickup. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of leagues out there where some of these guys are already owned, but the highest owned guy I'm going to talk about only shows 58% owned right this second. So for a lot of you out there, you may have some of this availability. Now, right here at the top of the list, I got Tyler Algier of the Atlanta Falcons, currently shows owned in 47% of leagues, has a matchup this upcoming week against Dallas, but most importantly, if anything were to happen to Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier's workload would go through the roof. We've seen him produce when given that kind of volume before. How about Zach Charbonnet? Of the Seattle Seahawks. And he currently shows that he's owned in 58% of leagues, which is not surprising. But Kenneth Walker has already been dealing with some illnesses and some minor injuries. If he were to miss time down the stretch, we know what Zach Charbonnet would do. We've seen him do it in the past. Then we have rookie running back Ray Davis in Buffalo. Kind of been on this up and down roller coaster here over the last few weeks, but if anything happens to James Cook, Ray Davis is the dude. He's only owned in 30% of leagues. What about Blake Corum for the Los Angeles Rams? He's basically somewhat of a clone of Kyren Williams. Similar play styles, similar abilities, and if anything were to happen to Kyren, whose usage is already super high, Blake Corum could be a late season great addition. How about Ty Chandler in Minnesota? He's backing up Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was dealing with a hip injury a couple weeks ago, doesn't look bad right now, but Aaron Jones isn't exactly known for staying healthy. In a good overall offense, Ty Chandler is an option, which brings us down to Braylon Allen next of the Jets, and he's currently 45% owned. A lot of people may have actually used him at times already this season, but this overall Jets offense right now just is not clicking. Now, if things get worse here second half of the season for the Jets, I can see them pull back the usage of Breece Hall a little bit and give Braylon Allen more opportunities, and then Justice Hill. He's impossible to figure out on a weekly basis, but when he touches the football, the dude is like a lightning rod on the field. He's currently 35% owned, and I know we already talked about Keaton Mitchell, who is nearing a return. But if Derrick Henry were to go down, it's not going to be some one-for-one change and somebody's just going to pick up that role and run with it. No, they're going to have to split backfield touches, and Justice Hill could have a great opportunity, especially in the pass-catching game, if something like that were to happen. So like I said, there weren't a lot of running backs to really add. Some hot waiver wire pickups here in Week 9. So I did want to include some of the top handcuffs so you can go out there and check your waiver wire to see if any of these names are sitting out there. If you have availability on the bottom of your bench just to stash one of these guys as a lottery ticket, I'm doing it. If you own some of the running backs that are ahead of these guys, you damn well better have their handcuff if you can possibly get it right now. All right, now we're moving over to wide receivers. And right here at the top of the list, we got Ladd McConkey of the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, he's 78% owned. Not a lot of people are going to be able to go out there and pick up Ladd McConkey, but a lot of people are going to ask questions about him because of his performance just last week, so I wanted to include him. Now, he has a matchup this week going up against Cleveland, but really what we saw last week is not something we need to get used to. His target share wasn't really any higher. The main difference was he had a 60-yard touchdown due to a crazy catch and bad overall defense. Now, he for sure needs to be owned in every single league. Does he need to be started weekly in every single league? That's for a different time, different place. But after him, we got Keon Coleman of the Buffalo Bills in a matchup this week going up against Miami. He's currently 63% owned, but I have been talking about this guy for weeks, and I'm going to continue to do it. Even though Amari Cooper hasn't really done a whole lot in this overall offense since he's joined Buffalo, he has elevated the play of Keon Coleman because he's not having to go out there and deal with top defensive attention. Coleman now has 7 targets in back-to-back ball games and at least 14 fantasy points in 2 straight games. Defensive attention is going to continue to look at Amari Cooper, and that is just freeing up the likes of Keon Coleman all over the field. In fact, I love Keon Coleman so much, I'm going to make him my SeatGeek pickup of the week. Now, we've been talking about SeatGeek here for a couple weeks, and hopefully you've gone out there and found yourself some event that you want to go to, and you got it at a little bit of a discount. I am narrowing down my decisions of where me and my son are going to go in week 18, but I want to know what games, if any, are you looking forward to going here towards the end of the season? Because Christmas is right around the corner, and I'm sure you have a lot of people you need to get some Christmas presents for. What better idea is there than to go out there and get a couple tickets to an event that you and a friend want to go to? You get to check Christmas present off the list, and you get to benefit by going as well. And it doesn't have to just be some NFL football game. There are over 70,000 events right now on SeatGeek, including concerts, festivals, and so much more. They are the #1 rated ticketing app out there, and honestly, they help you find the good deals. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10. Green means good, red means bad. But what's most important here is you need to use the discount I'm about to give you. By using the code word headliners at checkout, you're going to get $20 off. That's right, that is $20 off your first purchase with promo code headliners. Just make sure you check out the description of this video or the pinned comment. Go out there, download the app, and find an event you want to go to. Get in a little bit of a discount. But all right, back to wide receivers. Because we have a good one after Keon Coleman as well. It's Cedric Tillman of the Cleveland Browns. He's only 24% owned in a matchup going up against the Los Angeles Chargers. And talk about taking a chance and running with it. Right now, Cedric Tillman is absolutely exploding. Over the last 2 games, he's had 21 targets, 15 catches, 180 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. And we know with Jameis Winston under center, the Browns are going to continue to throw the ball quite a bit. Love some Cedric Tillman. He may be my SeatGeek pickup of the week #2. How about Jalen McMillan after him? He's 60% owned as of right now in a matchup going up against Kansas City. He led all wide receivers in targets in Tampa Bay. We also know that Sterling Shepard got banged up in that ball game, and it looks like Baker Mayfield's going to be able to go out each and every week, even without Evans and Godwin, and throw the ball with some success through the air. Now they have a matchup going up against Kansas City. Going to be hard to run on Kansas City. They're going to have to throw the ball this week. Then we go down to Parker Washington of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He is currently 0% owned in fantasy football with a matchup going up against Philadelphia. And really, this is just process of elimination in Jacksonville. With Brian Thomas Jr. hurt, Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk also hurt as well. Parker Washington, Evan Ingram, and Brenton Strange are really going to be the top targets in this Jacksonville offense. We already know it's difficult to run on Philadelphia. They're going to have to throw the ball this week. Parker Washington, he's a dart throw for sure. After him, we got Elijah Moore there of the Cleveland Browns. He's only 8% owned going up against the Chargers, and he is another one of these beneficiaries from Jameis Winston taking over. Really, this could be Elijah Moore / Jerry Jeudy. I don't have Jeudy on here. I like Elijah Moore a little bit more, but both these guys are in line for 8+ targets a week. The problem is a lot of the touchdown chances are going to be going the way of David Njoku and Cedric Tillman, so they may not have that overall upside. But if you're looking for PPR options, with Jameis throwing the ball as much as he is each week, they are options there in Cleveland. And then lastly, Khalif Raymond, kind of more of a short-term value here. He's only 2% owned going up against Green Bay. Really only gets one more week of being the team's wide receiver 2. Then we'll get Jamison Williams back. And this past week, he really benefited from a 90-yard punt return, but the team didn't have to throw the ball very much because they were absolutely destroying the Tennessee Titans. We didn't see Amon-Ra St. Brown do too much in that game either for that exact same reason. But like I said, more of a short-term play, maybe in a super deep league where you start 3 wide receivers and multiple flex spots, Khalif Raymond and the matchup this week, not entirely horrible. So, all right, that'll get us through wide receivers. Now we're moving to tight ends, and we got some good options out there on the waiver wire. Finally, at the tight end position, Cade Otton is at the top of the list. He's 71% owned. I've been talking about him for weeks. He's probably owned in the majority of leagues, but just go out there and check just to be safe because he needs to be owned in 100% of leagues. He now has back-to-back games with at least 10 targets, back-to-back games with at least 14 fantasy points, and he is really benefiting from Evans and Godwin's injury now that we know that Sterling Shepard is banged up as well, and a matchup going up against Kansas City, who allows the second most fantasy points per game to opposing tight ends. Cade Otton going to be super high on my ranking, so just go check to make sure. Then we have Dalton Schultz. He's 60% owned as of right now in a matchup going up against the Jets, and with Nico still out, and now Diggs likely done for quite some time, sure, Tank Dell is going to see an uptick in targets, but so is Dalton Schultz. He just tied a season high in catches and actually had a season high in receiving yards this past week. In an offense that we know is going to want to still throw the football, Dalton Schultz could be a main beneficiary there. How about Will Dissly of the Los Angeles Chargers? He's only 3% owned going up against Cleveland, and I have no idea where this usage has come from him the past couple of weeks. Over the last 2 weeks of the season, he has 18 targets, and this Cleveland offense showed us last week that they can go out there and put some points on the board, which means the Los Angeles Chargers are going to have to throw the ball all 4 quarters against Cleveland. Even though the ceiling isn't overly high, the usage is too great to ignore. How about Zach Ertz of the Washington Commanders? He's 40% owned going up against the Giants right now, and honestly, if this dude could score some touchdowns, he's probably top 5 overall in fantasy football right now. He's had at least 8 fantasy points in 3 straight ball games. He's definitely one of those safer options weekly. Hunter Henry, he's 43% owned going up against Tennessee. Another one of those safer tight end options, but the ceiling is just a lot lower. The team just does not score enough touchdowns to go around, especially if Drake May misses this game with a concussion. And then lastly, it's Brenton Strange of the Jacksonville Jaguars, 4% owned right now going up against Philadelphia. And with all the injuries in Jacksonville, you have to expect a larger role going the way of Brenton Strange, who just had 5 catches for 59 yards when given the opportunity this past week. And we know when he's had those chances earlier in the season, he was getting almost weekly touchdown opportunity as well. In a game going up against Philadelphia, I'm not going to put it past the Jacksonville Jaguars looking the way of Brenton Strange down the field. So that means all we have left to cover are a few defensive special teams units that you may be looking to add or stream this week. First one up, the Philadelphia Eagles. They're 40% owned going up against Jacksonville. We've already talked about all the injuries in Jacksonville here numerous times. How about the Patriots? They're going up against Tennessee. They're only 3% owned. We know that Mason Rudolph is always good for a couple of turnovers. The Lions, they're 69% owned. Nice. Going up against the Green Bay Packers. What if Malik Willis does start this week? If Jordan Love were to miss some time, they could be an added option. The Vikings, they're 75% owned. They're going up against Indianapolis. Anthony Richardson is just a turnover machine and really has limited passing upside. And then lastly, the Bengals, they're 24% owned going up against Las Vegas. Not my top option here by any means, but a viable option against a lower scoring opponent, which will then get us through the waiver wire. And typically this is where we talk about 5 players that we're okay with dropping heading into this week, into week 9. And honestly, I don't know very many people that can be dropped as of right now due to all the injuries. So this is what I want to do for week 9. If you have a move that you want to make on the waiver wire, leave a comment down below. Now, if you want to have a great chance of me responding to your comments, you got to keep it short and sweet. Tell me who you want to drop. Tell me who you want to pick up. If I think it's a good move, I will do my best to respond to as many comments as I possibly can on this video. I'm sorry, I wish I had time to read paragraphs, but I just don't. But I do want to be sure to continue to stay active in the comment section with you, the community. Now, if you enjoyed today's show, do me a favor by hitting the like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I don't care that the fantasy season is halfway over, you still need to join Headliner Nation. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day, but hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day, and then most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.